Welcome to the Umbra Vortex, where whispers begin and screams never end. Beyond this point, only madness awaits. This isn't a place for comfort, only for truth. Not the kind found in books or muttered in confession, but a raw, unfiltered reality, cloaked in shadow, stitched with dread, and pulsing just beneath the skin of sanity. I'm Edward J. Hallow, and I'll be the last voice you hear before the silence consumes you. Tonight you'll hear a tale of ghosts and the shadows they leave behind. A dark ride through the woods, a figure of legend, and a man who dared to face the unknown. This is the legend of Sleepy Hollow, where not all who vanish are forgotten. In the fog-choked woods of New York's Hudson Valley, where trees stoop like withered sentinels and shadows cling to the earth, there lies a place swallowed by silence. As dusk falls, the light drains away, and the woods whisper with groaning branches and the echoes of something old and watching. They call it Sleepy Hollow. Here the air is thick with whispers, secrets that never found their graves. The wind doesn't just blow, it speaks in frantic hisses, telling tales of death, decay, and things far worse. This place is haunted, not just by ghosts, but by stories that burrow into dreams and twist into living nightmares. Sleepy Hollow was no ordinary town. It wasn't just caught between the present and the past, it was caught between reality and nightmare. Time moved differently here, like molasses in cold water, so thick and slow it left you wondering if you had somehow wandered out of time altogether. The people who lived here were simple folk, farmers, laborers, woodsmen, yet they carried ancient fears like a curse passed down through generations. They spoke of spirits with mouths of ash, of witches who spoiled crops and cursed the land, of ghostly soldiers still marching old battlefields, but none inspired dread like the tale of the one who pierced even the bravest soul. The Headless Horseman, a Hessian soldier, slain by a cannonball in the chaos of war, whose decapitated body rose from the grave, a corpse that could never rest, driven by an unholy hunger, eternally searching for the head that had been torn from him. By night, he rode the land on his monstrous black steed, and wherever he went, death followed. The wind would howl in his wake, carrying the sound of heavy hooves and the unmistakable weight of something ancient, something vengeful. They said he hunted, relentlessly, for his severed head. And then came Ichabod Crane. He was an odd figure, a gaunt, spindly man, whose presence seemed to hang in the air like a marionette cut loose from its strings. His nose was sharp and pointed, his shoulders narrow and hunched, his gait awkward, as though his bones did not quite fit his skin. A teacher by trade, a man of books and theories, Ichabod saw the world through the lens of reason. He didn't simply believe in ghosts, he feared them. He felt them, saw them, lurking at the edges of his vision, like things just beyond the reach of the light. But he was clever, learned, and, above all, deeply superstitious. He boarded with local farmers, teaching their children by day, and spinning tales of the supernatural by candlelight at night. It was in these quiet, fire-lit hours that the true stories would emerge, stories that chilled the bones, stories that made even the bravest men quicken their step, as though they, too, could feel the hand of something watching them from the dark. Ichabod had a flaw, a crack in his mind that let darkness seep in. He didn't just fear spirits, he believed in them. And that belief became his curse. He also believed he could win the heart of Katrina Van Tassel, the town's beauty and romantic prize, heir to a vast fortune. To him, she wasn't just love. She was his escape from poverty, his ticket to a life free from hunger and cold fires. But Katrina had another suitor, Brom Bones, a brawny, wild-eyed man with fists like hammers and a laugh that echoed like a thunderclap. He was the town's golden boy, a prankster, a hunter, and a horseman whose presence seemed to make the very ground shake beneath him. He didn't need to threaten Ichabod. He simply smiled at him, with a grin that could freeze the blood in your veins. It was a smile that whispered of dominance, of an unspoken understanding that no one would ever stand between Brom and what he wanted. Still, Ichabod pressed on. He saw himself as the hero of this story, the clever underdog who would win the girl and defeat the brute. But the forces at play were not as simple as he imagined. One October night, beneath a swollen harvest moon, the Van Tassels hosted their annual feast. The wind outside howled through the trees as though the forest itself were alive with whispers and groans. The air smelled of cider, wood smoke, and something heavier, something ancient. Inside, the night was full of music and shadows, the flickering firelight casting ghostly shapes on the walls. Guests whispered their favorite ghost stories, some so dark they seemed to hang in the air like thick fog. And then came the tale of the horseman. Voices dropped to a hush. They spoke of glowing eyes like burning embers, a black steed that breathed smoke, and the church bridge, the only place the horseman would never cross. Some believed the bridge's sacred ground held power over the cursed rider, offering a slim chance of escape. Ichabod laughed along, but his eyes darted to the windows where the shadows seemed to shift. His heart raced, and the stillness of the night pressed in, the trees outside holding their breath. Later, he lingered behind to speak with Katrina. No one knows what was said between them, but when Ichabod left, his shoulders were slumped, and his eyes were dark with something that seemed almost hollow. He mounted his horse, Gunpowder, a worn, trembling beast, and set off on the long, lonely ride home. The road was a tunnel of twisted limbs. The trees arched overhead like skeletal fingers, blotting out the moon and casting deep shadows that swallowed him whole. The air grew colder with each step, and the silence pressed in like a heavy hand to the throat. The stillness was unnatural, unnerving, and then came the hooves, heavy, deliberate, too steady to be imagined. Ichabod turned, fear creeping into his chest, and saw him, the horseman. The figure was mounted on a monstrous black horse, cloaked in shadow, his form so dark it seemed to suck the very light from the world around him. But it was the thing that made Ichabod's blood run cold, the thing that shattered his mind, that the rider was headless. The stump of his neck steamed with an unnatural mist, an aura of death swirling around him. His cloak flared behind him like wings, and his dark, hollow body exuded the stench of rot and grave earth. Ichabod froze. His heart thundered in his chest as his mind screamed for him to flee. But his body couldn't move. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to go silent. The wind, the forest, even his own frantic thoughts, all disappeared. And then, the horseman spurred his steed forward. Ichabod screamed, the sound tearing from his throat like a wounded animal. Gunpowder shrieked beneath him, hooves pounding against the ground as the horse surged forward, faster than Ichabod had ever felt him run before. The trees blurred past him, their branches reaching out like claws, scratching at his coat, tearing at his flesh. Behind him, the horseman was gaining. The air around him seemed to twist, the wind screaming in his ears, as if something ancient and malevolent were stirring, urging the horse forward. The only thing that could save him now was the bridge. The church bridge, where the ground was sacred, where the horseman could not cross. Ichabod saw it ahead, faintly glowing in the moonlight. Salvation. He leaned forward, urging Gunpowder faster, pushing his steed to the very edge of exhaustion. His heart hammered against his ribs as the bridge grew closer, the pale outline of the church looming in the distance. He crossed the bridge, and then he turned. The horseman stopped. He stood there, motionless, yet filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. His steed snorted, steam rising from its nostrils, eyes glowing with fire. And then he lifted his arm. Not a sword, not a skull, but a flaming pumpkin. It was grotesque, a twisted grin carved into the orange flesh, its jagged teeth seeming to move as the flame flickered within. And with a sudden, brutal motion, the horseman hurled it through the air. It screamed through the night, the fire dancing in the air like a demon unleashed. It struck Ichabod square in the chest, and then everything went black. The next morning, Gunpowder was found near the schoolhouse, reins dragging in the mud. The horse was trembling, its eyes wide with fear. But Ichabod was gone. By the church bridge, they found only his hat, torn, covered in dirt and blood, and scattered about the shattered remains of that accursed gourd. No body, no blood, no sign of him. Some whispered the horseman took him. Others claimed Ichabod had fled in terror, mad with heartbreak, his mind broken by the horrors he had seen. But Brom Bones! He married Katrina not long after, and whenever Ichabod's name came up, Brom would chuckle, a little too quickly, a little too loud. His eyes would flash with something cold, something dark. And to this day, the horseman rides in Sleepy Hollow, when the fog coils low and the woods fall still, when the air seems to thicken with the weight of something watching, he rides. You might hear him, the gallop, the scream, the laughter, guttural and wrong. So if you find yourself in Sleepy Hollow, don't linger by the bridge. Don't look back. And whatever you do, don't lose your head. He laughed at legends and found himself riding straight into one. Bravery was worn like armor, but fear slipped through the cracks. In the end, he vanished not into myth, but into memory. This was the legend of Sleepy Hollow, a reminder that some stories don't end. They wait. I'm Edward J. Hallow, and if you're still listening, beware what follows when the road grows quiet.